Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sizwe Nxasana. I'm the CEO and the founder of Future Nation Schools. Future Nation Schools is a company, obviously, which offers education from preschool to grade 12, but we're also part of a larger group called Sifiso Learning Group, which includes our education technology company called Sifiso EdTech, our real estate company called Sifiso Education Properties. And Future Nation Schools offers Africa-centered, technology-enabled, and affordable education. And we're really pleased to have all of you today in this webinar where we talk about a very, very topical issue, which is the impact of AI on education as well as the world of work. This is something that's on the lips of a lot of people globally, but I'm not alone. And with me here, I have Dr. Tshifhiwa Maumela, who's a PhD and has a doctorate in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And in fact, he occupies a position at Vodacom as a senior machine learning engineer. He's had a lot of experience, and not only is he an engineer on the one side, he also has a master's from Japan in economics. And he's worked for a lot of few large companies, including financial services sector and so on. And he's going to talk to us about the impact of AI on the world of work, on the world of work. So that's really important. On my other side, on my extreme side, is Xoliswa Mahlangu. Xoliswa Mahlangu, a lot of you would know, especially if you've joined our previous Future Talks. She has addressed many, many issues, especially around technology, whether it is coding and robotics that we offer at Future Nation Schools, or it's the impact of digital learning in the education environment. And she is the head of our digital learning at Future Nation Schools. But also, right now, in fact, Xoli is playing a very important role of helping the Department of Basic Education through various provinces in training teachers. So she leads a team that's training teachers, particularly in public schools, as the introduction of coding and robotics is now happening in government schools as well. So it's a very important role that Xoli is playing in that regard. So today's topic is really important, and we're going to share the talk this evening amongst the three of us. I will start and talk about just the high-level impact of AI on the world of education and the world of work. I will then pass on to Dr. Tshifhiwa to talk about the world of work in more specific terms, and then hand over to Xoli. Just a couple of house rules. We will have Q&A, but you are not going to put up your hand for Q&A. We ask you to please use the chat function for all your questions, and then we'll be able to navigate them. Secondly, yes, we will mute people, but sometimes people find a way in the back end to unmute themselves. So if I could please ask you to remain muted, we will have an opportunity at the end, obviously, to then go through the chat functions and all the questions that will have been posted on the chat to address them. So please, just so that we don't interrupt other people as they are listening and we end up with a lot of background noise. So if I could just appeal to everybody to do that. So yes, the world of artificial intelligence is on everybody's lips. Internationally, it doesn't matter what platform you open, whether it's television, newspapers, magazines, and so on. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. But particularly because ChatGPT, particularly when it got released, it really ran like wildfire. It's been the fastest growing application in the world, and a lot of people only became aware of artificial intelligence when that happened. But at the end of the day, I thought it was important just to the world of artificial intelligence is obviously developing, and there are a lot of different things. There's a huge amount of money, especially dollars, that are flowing into artificial intelligence. It was important for me just to in terms of how I see it. How do we see artificial intelligence and how do we demystify it? And there are various aspects of artificial intelligence. We see it in our everyday lives, and in fact, Dr. Tshifhiwa is going to talk about that in his presentation and in his talk. But there's machine learning on the one hand. There are platforms that are natural language processing platforms, such as Bard or ChatGPT, that have emerged, especially in the recent past, in the last year. But you have other platforms, facial recognition, speech recognition, platforms that have been developed over a couple of years now that are used in the marketplace, and some of them we use in our everyday lives. When you look at ChatGPT as an example, and a lot of people, including learners, are using ChatGPT, it's based on natural language processing, but it has speech recognition functions. It has video and text, functionality in it, which really is what makes it amazing, because suddenly we have something that us humans, who are not engineers like Dr. Tshifhiwa, can actually use for a lot of things that we use in our daily lives. So that's why I think when you talk about the world of artificial intelligence, it's important to understand the whole ecosystem of AI. So Dr. Tshifhiwa over here is an engineer that specializes particularly in machine learning. But as I said earlier, there are other aspects of artificial intelligence. But when you look at the key trends that are happening with artificial intelligence, obviously there's a lot of concern and fear that artificial intelligence is going to remove a lot of jobs. And when I look at reports that have come out of Forbes or Reuters or the World Economic Forum and others, there's a clear indication that whilst, yes, there are a lot of jobs that are going to be affected, and in fact, the estimate is that somewhere in the region of about 400 million jobs are going to be wiped out in the next couple of years. There are new jobs that are going to be created out of AI. And it is important for us, especially for us who are in the education ecosystem, to understand the opportunities that are arising. So whether we are governments and people who are involved in policy making or regulations or actually teaching in the classroom, whether it's in schools or higher education institutions, to understand that there are major opportunities that exist. Obviously, if we as Africans particularly, and Future Nation schools are very Afrocentric in our approach, if we are not involved in co-creating the direction of artificial intelligence, if we are not involved in policy making to remove the barriers, and we saw a lot of barriers, especially during COVID, where a lot of our children were left behind, when children that were in schools that are able to offer online or blended learning were able to continue learning, the gaps of inequality and unemployment and poverty are going to get worse. So that's why we thought it was important to have this webinar and this talk, particularly in the context of Africa. What do we do as Africans or as South Africans to make sure that we close the gap of inequality, unemployment, and poverty, and leverage artificial intelligence in ways that are going to make it possible for our young people to participate meaningfully in the economy? Because when you look at, for instance, the amount of money that is flowing, just using as statistics, it's almost 5 times, of the economy. Almost 20% of the, U.S. Economy will be pushed or will be advanced by artificial intelligence. So, as Africans and as South Africans, it's really important that we are not left behind, but that our children particularly are not left behind. So the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, this was 2019, even before the advent of ChatGPT or Bard and Bing and so on, estimated that already there are 230 million jobs. 230 million jobs that are available in Africa today in the digital space. But when you look at what schools, universities, TVET colleges are producing, they're still producing skills and competences in areas that are actually dying. So there's a huge mismatch in the skills that are being produced in our continent, but particularly in our country where the spectre of unemployed youth, where we have almost 70% of our young people not working. So it is important for government, policymakers, universities, schools to understand that we need to change how we do things quickly, because the development of AI is happening at a very rapid rate, so that we can close the gap between what the world of work is looking for, especially because the world of work is now borderless. It doesn't matter where you sit. Some of our students at Future Nation schools already, whilst they're still at school, are doing work for companies overseas. If they are able to code and they are able to do work, especially in the digital space, it doesn't matter where you are. So we can create a lot of opportunities for our children who are sitting in the townships and villages, provided we reduce the cost of data and provided we reduce the cost of all the issues that are required in the ecosystem: devices, access to data, access to education, and access to platforms. That's really going to be very important. So if you look at high-paying jobs that just didn't exist a couple of years ago, these days when you use ChatGPT or any of these natural language platforms, you use prompts, and the questions and the prompts that you use in asking the questions are really important, because if you're using ChatGPT and you're asking it, for instance, using incorrect language, which is why looking at opportunities that exist to use artificial intelligence, particularly for indigenous languages, becomes important, because we're not first language English speakers. 80% of the country is not. And therefore, if we can leverage off artificial intelligence and get involved as Africans in developing natural language in our indigenous languages, and get involved in data, in collecting our own data, then that way we'll be able to create opportunities for the world of work for a lot of our young people who otherwise, may not have been employed. So if you look at the list, and I won't really go through the list that we have on our screen, but just to say, you can just look at every day there are new jobs that are being created that didn't even exist. So as educators, we're training children for jobs that we don't even know exist or will exist. And what's important is to develop not just a knowledge piece, but the skills and competencies of young people to be able to navigate a space where technology is fast changing, the world is chaotic, and therefore they can continue to play a very important role in their lives. It is important for us to realize that there is the good, the bad, and the ugly of artificial intelligence. Excuse me. So, and it is really important. Obviously, for us at Future Nation schools who are already using artificial intelligence, and Xoli is going to talk a lot about that, there are many things that we can do to reduce menial tasks or routine tasks and therefore improve productivity. We can actually, what artificial intelligence is doing is to democratize a lot of the skills. Like, for instance, previously you needed to be a very experienced coder, and maybe you are a content generator or video generator and text generator, as an example. With AI, today you don't need to be an expert in some of those things. Because artificial intelligence can actually generate text for you, can generate advice for you. If you are going on a trip and you want to know, you don't even need to go to Google, because Google and search engines are really limited. But artificial intelligence gives you a lot of richer information in a lot of areas that include the world of work in which you work. And that's why there are a lot of things that we humans can't do well, and machines can do much better. And this is the benefit of artificial intelligence that we are going to continue to see. The bad of it, obviously, when you go to ChatGPT or some of these languages or the AI natural language platforms, they'll give you a health warning that, you must not believe everything that you see or that you download. because, you know, these systems are still prone to hallucinations. They give you stuff. Because of the way the algorithms work, they're going to give you information sometimes that is not accurate. You know, if you search, who is Sizwe Nxasana, it will say, maybe I'm a director of Standard Bank. Why? Because they collect information from different sources, which may not be true. So it is important, therefore, for all users of AI to know, to be critical thinkers, to understand that, you know, you cannot just take as gospel everything that you get out of AI. There are a lot of privacy and ethical issues that are coming out of AI, which we need to be aware of. And it is also important to recognize, if you are a content creator, you're an artist, and so on, certainly, you know, a lot of the stuff that you may do may find its way, you know, in artificial intelligence, other people taking your IP, your intellectual property, and claiming as if it was theirs. So obviously job losses are going to be, we're already seeing job losses. And the ugly of it, of artificial intelligence, is that already, I mean, I'm sure, you know, it doesn't matter which bank you bank with, there are health warnings today because artificial intelligence has made it much, much easier for people to steal your money, for people to misinform, for people to hack into systems, for people to develop rogue systems that are really going to cause a lot of harm in our own lives. So it is important for us to educate one another, especially in the context of schools, to educate our young people that, you know, they must not be gullible to believe everything that they see generated by, you know, these natural language platforms such as ChatGPT and so on. In our own context, you know, in education, you see it's quite interesting because, you know, just recently I was in one of the developed countries. You know, I'm studying and doing a PhD in Denmark, and I visited some of the schools there. Some schools are banning artificial intelligence, which I found interesting, especially coming out of, you know, sort of first world countries. Some people are sitting on the fence and trying to understand what does it mean in terms of plagiarism and the ability to generate original content for learners. But, you know, some of us, such as in Future Nation schools, are embracing artificial intelligence because we believe it is the world of the future. And Xoli is going to talk a lot about what we are doing in our world using artificial intelligence as a platform, as a co-pilot to assist us in doing our jobs much better. So with that, I am going to now hand over to Dr. Tshifhiwa to take us through his presentation. And as I said, I just want to emphasize that at the end of the presentation, we'll go through all the questions that are in the chat to be able to answer, you know, your questions. There are already a number of, you know, questions that are out there, but I also just want to apologize a little bit. We seem to have had some technical difficulties. The Zoom link that we sent didn't quite work for some people. So there's a link which we have posted on Vimeo to make sure that you can follow what is you know, going on in this webinar. So we'd like to just apologize for that. Always, you know, there are always gremlins with technology, which is one of the things that sometimes we need to be aware of. But, you know, there is a link on Vimeo. In case you missed you know, the first part of this presentation, you're welcome to go there. But we'll also share this whole video of this webinar on our platforms at the end of it. So you can still go back and log into it and so on at the end of these Future Talks. So with that, let me take this opportunity to again introduce Dr. Tshifhiwa Maumela here, who's a senior machine learning engineer at Vodacom, who's going to you know, address us. Thank you very much. Over to you, Tshifhiwa.
Thank you, Sizwe. Thank you guys. So as was stated, I'm Dr. Tshifhiwa Maumela. did my PhD in artificial intelligence, and as part of my PhD, we developed an algorithm that is based on Ubuntu philosophies. But that will not be the topic of today. The topic of today will be us talking about what is AI being used in our everyday life, and also we'll try to focus on what exactly does AI have to do in terms of early child development. So maybe one of the first things that I would like to bring the focus in here is the fact that I do understand that most of the audience here is parents who are very much concerned about what is actually this AI thing going to do to their children, and why do these children have to be learning AI. So I will try as much as I possibly can to explain AI to the 12-year-olds who are probably also tuned in right now to watch this talk, to explain what AI is in the fundamentals. So if we were to look in the diagram that I have here, I've got a picture here of beds, a picture of couches, picture of tables, like dining tables, some are just display tables, and different forms of chairs that you can see here. So what I want to show you from this picture is that machine learning learns exactly the same way that we are able to learn, that when you're looking at any particular chair, that thing is a chair because you have learned the fundamental principles and how it looks like in its free body diagram. So if we were to remember back when we were still learning in the early ages, the chair would be presented as an H. And then it is from there where you realize that, oh, okay, so when it's an H with a smaller width, then it means that it's chair. But if it's an H with a longer width, then that is a bed. So that is how we learned to distinguish things as we were growing up, as we were learning in our early development. And that is exactly how we teach machines. We feed them with all these different objects, and we find something which in our language in machine learning we call them features. But features are basically just things that we use to describe what something is. So if we were to look at something, if we say, if you look it from the top down, this is how you draw it. If you look from the side, this is how you look at it. If you look it from the bottom, this is how it will look like. So those are the features that we then ultimately use to train the machine machine, and then that's when we say it's a machine learning exercise. So within AI, there are pretty much three main core parts of this learning process that happens. The first one is supervised learning, and then there's unsupervised learning, and then there's reinforcement learning. Then what is supervised learning? In the context of the early child development, supervised learning is when the teacher stands in front of the kids, provide the material to the kids, and also provides them the answer. That answer in machine learning, we call it the ground truth, because that is the truth that the kids will be learning and being marked, and then go back and do corrections until that point when the kids are able to generalize the information that they have learned to other information that they had never been presented with before, because that is exactly what the machine learning is doing. It is taking the learnings and go and generalize them in cases that it has never seen before. Then we have unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning is something that we start developing as we grow older, where now because when we grow older, we'd like to associate things to different groups in such a way that we are able to pick up what are the different features so that we can learn the better representation of those things. One good way of using it, the word that I was trying to move away from using, is words like segmentation. You go on and look at like for example, we've segmented cars into saying that this is a sedan, this is a bakkie, this is a taxi, because we looked at the different features and the different functionalities that car actually does. And then there's reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is basically how you can think of it as a conditioning. So what you're doing is you have a reward or a punishment that you give to a person when they do something good. It's a thing they call it the carrot and stick mechanism. That's what you're basically doing. And in most cases, we use reinforcement learning to actually even train animals. I think that is the one place where we can see reinforcement learning being used in more depth cases. So we also do that in machine learning, where we teach the machine by giving it rewards or punishing it if it does something that does not favor our objective and what we want it to do for us. So I also talked earlier about unsupervised learning. So in this picture here, for example, I want to bring you back again to see how we then go on and do the clustering. So if we were to go on and look at saying, but how do I go on and group these images that I'm seeing here? This is where you look at things such as functionalities. For example, someone might decide, like, you know what, I just want to look at the functionalities, and then from the functionalities that you have here, you can see that you can group different objects here based on objects that are to be set on. You can group some on basis on the fact that these are objects that can be used for storage, and some being the objects that can be used for aesthetics. And that is how we learned. These are some of the things, as well as I was indicating, you never learned about them when you were still in the early stages, but as you started growing older, you learned how you can go on and segment things like that. And in here, there's one point which I would like to bring back to us as well, which I hear most of the times people being scared of the developments within the AI space, especially now that we have technologies, AI technologies that you can come and use. So initially, before the big talks around generative AI, AI was very much it was very much not involved in people's lives in the sense that people were not able to interact with it if they had not studied anything around the AI subjects. What does this mean, and what do we mean by this? We have all experienced AI in our lives. We all use AI products. Some, after this presentation, you're going to switch on Netflix. That is run through a recommendation engine which is based on machine learning. Some of you use Spotify. Some of you might have realized with your Gmail, for example, you get an email. Sometimes it will even prompt you and say, like, oh, you've not responded. By the time you go on and respond, sometimes it is put in some suggestive replies for you. That is everything in there that is AI. And I will explain as we go further what exactly was happening there. With Instagram, I think is actually a very interesting one, because on Instagram, when you go on to the search button, when you go to the Explore, it curates all the different profiles that are related to the materials that you have liked before. So this is where you then see the main difference between that old applications of that old way in which AI was being applied to the way in which we are talking about AI today in the generative AI era. What is actually the main difference there is that in the old one, you didn't have to, when you made a transaction on Netflix to say, I'm watching this, that activity that you were watching was basically you prompting, which is now different from what generative AI is allowing you to do, because generative AI is now allowing you to explicitly put in your prompts. So you are now able to use your natural language to say, this is what I want to do. And that's what Sizwe showed in the previous slide. You saw it now has the ability to see the context and understand the question that you're asking. And then from there, it goes into the deep learning frameworks that are being used there to say, how do I sequence? If these are the words that have been sequenced, and the context that I'm understanding in this case, how do I then sequence the next words that would be more relevant to this context? The same way that a recommender system would have done. And as I indicated, the recommending systems that you're finding on your Netflix, on your Spotify, on your LinkedIn, those were based on your prompts on the transactions that you had created yourself. So as was indicated by Sizwe, in generative AI, you're talking about things like ChatGPT, Bard, and Del 2. Del 2, for example, is pretty much what we're using here today. I'm not with Sizwe and Xoli in the same room actually today. We're using Del 2. We just said, let us try to simulate us being in the same room. I wish we actually did that. I'm just joking there. So they're even showing you guys to show that we are actually indeed in the same room. But that's what you could pretty much use Del 2 for. I'm sure most of you guys you've heard about cases about deep fakes and stuff like that. So deep fakes are actually things that were done using technology such as Del 2 and other deficient models. So one of the questions that we then need to be basically asking is that, but then why should the future nations be introducing AI, and why should other schools try to follow suit and introduce AI in their curriculum? And I share the same sentiments that was shared to say, why are people banning the usage of that generative AI within the schools? Because one of the things that we need to start doing, instead of banning, instead of saying that people must not use certain things, is to try to teach people about the responsible use of things. Because if you don't teach people about the responsible use of things, what will ultimately happen is that they will find a way to go learn about it, and when they learn about it, they will learn on pretty much all the wrong things about that technology. So right now, what we need to be doing is we need to be saying, let us allow the young people to learn how to use this technology and how this technology actually works, and then we build the knowledge based on the knowledge that already exists. And what do we mean by this? I will use a personal example reflecting back in my own life, how it was. When I was growing up, I didn't have my own personal computer. We only started having personal computer, I think my own laptop, my own desktop actually, I think in my second year university. And then that was when I even learned how to program back then. So if you were to look at it, the next generation does not have to go through the same kind of challenges that we went through when we were young. Your parents wouldn't allow you to touch their phones. But right now, Sifiso was even asking us how to make his phone to do a screen rotation, because we now understand more about technology than they did back then. So that's what we mean by let the knowledge be built on the previous knowledge. And that's what we need to realize, that the time to actually expose the young generation to this technology is now. Look at how good they are in operating the smartphones. So why not start introducing how they can go on with using AI technologies? But now let's go back and say, what are the things that we need within this AI if we want to make it a reality that can happen on a regular basis and in our real life, and what do we need to do? So there are main 4 components that I would like us to get into here in our mind. So as it is called machine learning, the first of all is just like any course, any subject. There's materials that need to be curated in order to be prepared as material to teach, and that is what in the machine learning space, in the AI space, we call data. So you can get this data from the internet. You can get this data from pretty much anywhere. You can curate it from different places. The second thing that you need is a teacher. A teacher is the person who's building an AI system. So myself going on and building an AI model, I'm the teacher of that system, because what I'm doing is I'm making the machine learn. So as the teacher, I'm the one who's responsible. So hence we need to have that part of saying you need to have responsible AI into building these different models and these different tools that we have. And the next thing that you will need is the learning environment. So which means you basically need a computer where you can be programming your solutions on, and that is one element that the schools are actually trying to help in assisting to make sure that are available for the students to have. Then you have the learning strategies. Learning strategies just basically means it's machine learning algorithms. These are just algorithms that can be curated and be prepared in all different forms, the same way that we prepare any part in the pedagogies as it will be used in the education system. What I mean by that is that, for example, we even have something called collaborative learning, where it will be the same case as students learning together. There are some cases as curriculum learning, where you're preparing a curriculum and you send to this machine. You need to learn based on this curriculum and these different objectives. So there are different ways in which we can go about doing it in that way. So now, another question that comes is that, but how do we get started? What do we need? And in most cases, the interesting part is that what you need is freely available. What you can start off with a language called Python. Is the most commonly used language for developing most of the machine learning algorithms on these AI systems. In fact, most of these large language models are actually built based on Python. So that's all you're going to need is to install that Python on your machine. You just need to install a package called Anaconda, and then you'll be able to have most of the things that you need. And then, as I mentioned, you need to have data, and the data you can get the data and you put it in Excel. You start by learning how to manipulate a few data and putting it in Excel. And one thing that then becomes very interesting and more important is especially when we need to teach the kids first around these large language models, is to get things like such as large language models APIs. We have some in here in South Africa that were done. In fact, I think they're available across the continent in Africa. They're called AfriBet. They're done by the guys in UP, where they've trained some of these models with African languages. So the kids can actually start playing around with those. I think some of them are freely available, if I remember correctly. And then when we do that, we can start including this to our curriculum. So one of the things that we then see in these things is that we are now actually at a point where we are able to teach kids subjects such as robotics, science, within the libraries. And these things are things that initially they were difficult to put in, but as they matured, as the fields matured, it became easy to include them within our curriculum. The same thing can happen with AI as well. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Tshifhiwa. That's really, really interesting. And let me just take this opportunity again to apologize for the technical issues that we seem to have had or seem to be having, especially on the Zoom platform. But also just there's enough space in our alternative Vimeo platform. And we have shared the link for the Vimeo platform with yourselves. So if, for instance, you have a friend or somebody you know who's been battling to join, please share the link which is in the chat for the Vimeo link, so that they are able to join this conversation. So please, we again apologize for the technical glitches that we seem to be having on Zoom, but we have the Vimeo platform. And in fact, we have almost 100 people or more that are now sitting on Vimeo. So, and in case we have a little bit of an issue, again on Zoom, please, just bear with us. We will, sort it out. Our technical people are working feverishly at the back. We'll, if you happen to be kicked out of Zoom, we'll reinitiate it. Otherwise, you can join the Vimeo link as well. So, and thanks very much for your understanding. I'm now going to take this opportunity to hand over to Xoliswa Mahlangu, our Head of Digital Learning at Future Nation Schools. So over to you, Xoliswa.
Hi, everyone. I've just been listening to a doctor here, and he's speaking about Python and speaking about all these languages and getting a computer the first time when he was in second year. Unfortunately, this is such a reality for a whole lot of students who don't get access to computing at schools. It's a lived reality for a whole lot of people who are in the tech space. I remember first year in computer science, people were already asking about for loops and how they differ from Java for loops. And there I was thinking, how do I get this thing to print hello world, right? Not even do crazy things, just printing hello world. But because we have access to generative AI, the world is changing. And there's so much more that we can do. So this is a common thing that we see everywhere, right? With ChatGPT and its popularity, everybody's panicked. They're thinking, okay, ChatGPT is after our jobs, and ChatGPT is going to be doing everything, and even the menial things that we've been doing, like building and stuff, ChatGPT is going to be taking over. As we start off this talk, relax. It's not taking all the jobs. It might be changing how they look, but it's not taking everything. Skills are not replaceable that much. Every place where you go, whether you are watching the news, you're in social media, images like this are very common. You're getting suggestions on platforms to use, and this just shows that, yes, ChatGPT is popular, but it's not the only thing. There's so many AI tools, and so many AI tools that have been built off the back of technologies like ChatGPT. So as we've just started that, my talk will be looking at AI as a student assistant, a teacher's assistant, for general admin, and what the future looks like, and how we can create inventors, and also just a bit of a caution on the dark side of ChatGPT. So let's get started. So as a student assistant, right, one of the biggest issues that South Africa is facing, and I think on almost every report you read, is that our grade 4s cannot read for meaning, right? And tools like ChatGPT can be so helpful because they can help our students read for meaning. They can take that text and ask it to explain a topic in terms that they would understand as a beginner. So let's take it back to that computer science class. If I had that opportunity to say, okay, explain to me as a beginner. Yes, everyone else in the class is not at the level that I'm at. Explain to me as a beginner. Like, what's the main argument of this essay? We've spoken about how 80% of South Africans are not first language English speakers. And some of the times we're not missing the actual content, we're missing the language. And if we could understand the language, we'd understand the concepts even better. Can you summarize this article in less than 200 words and actually take out what's more important? When a lot of people are actually studying, they waste so much time in synthesizing the content that's out there. Search engines are really wide and big, and if you can't summarize and synthesize the information really quickly, you might spend so many hours endlessly reading articles that have no value for you. Can you explain this research paper? A lot of content that is written, most of the time, is inaccessible for the general reader, right? And what does this paragraph say? Quickly just copying over a paragraph and actually getting the meaning from that. And what is the main theme in the story? So a lot of people are thinking students are actually using models like ChatGPT for cheating, but there's so much learning that they could actually be doing by using the correct prompts and not just copying and pasting. AI as a tutor, just using commands like, can you describe what photosynthesis is? So instead of having an actual tutor that your parent needs to pay for, you could ask those direct questions to a model. And can you help me understand this piece? So not the whole program, but just this piece of code. Can you help me understand that? The same way you'd be able to ask a real life tutor who's explaining concepts to you. Can you help me find resources? Can you help me brainstorm ideas for my African Studies project? One of the things that I think the other speakers have already mentioned, if we do not use AI in the African context, it will never understand the African spaces, and there's more misinformation that could actually happen. So writing prompts like that is also going to be quite helpful. What does this paragraph say? And can you give me 10 practice questions? So the same way a tutor at home would be able to say, okay, now that we've learned this concept, how do we then translate it, and how do I then test your knowledge? So AI can be used for that. Generative AI has really great implications in the personalized learning space. So personalized content creation. How do I use apps like Photomats to take a picture of a sum and it explains to me at the level where I am? The general classroom, whether it's a group of 25 students or a group of 40 students, most of the time people are not at the same level, and because content can only be delivered in infinite ways, teachers sometimes overlook that. So having systems that can personalize the content creation, adapting to your learning path. So you've been able to do question 1, 2, and 3, then it directs you to questions that will be more challenging. Creating spaces where there's interactive learning experiences, like gamifying. A lot of students, young and old alike, they like that element of competition. They like that element of being able to see where they rank with things. So generative AI can also be used for that. Automated feedback and tutoring, being able to see how you are doing as you're going along, and personalized assessments and creative exploration. Those are some of the key things that generative AI can be used for in personalized learning. Systems like Newton, Photomath, Quizlet, and Century are some of the examples that students can use. But students can also be writing prompts that are outside of the general classroom, like outside of the learning spaces. If I wanted to learn a new skill, say I want to learn how to screen print, give me a 30-day plan on how I do that. Can you explain how I use a soldering iron? Can you explain how I safely store things? What type of wood should I use for outdoor furniture? Why isn't my DIY drone flying? Those are all questions that you can ask to the models, because they've got the access to all the content that's there, and they're already synthesizing it, and you're just going to that one article that can take you step by step. Generative AI is also great at creating AI-powered study planners. We know for a lot of students, especially around this time, it's exam season. Some have just gone off exam season, and sometimes their day just looks like that. Everything is due at the same time. How do they organize their tasks? How do they create content around it? How do they visually see it? How do they then get the efficiency? And how do they then personalize their learning journey from that? All of that can be generated using very specific prompts or very specific AI-powered apps. And students can also use AI tools for content creation. So they're given all these assignments, and they can use tools that help them just get the assignment done a whole lot quicker. Canva's introduced a lot of smart AI capabilities where it can help you plan out your document, give you suggested images, do things a whole lot quicker than you would have. Grammarly with how you write and suggesting how you would phrase things, how things just make more sense. Quailbot, as rephrasing and making sure that you are not doing things. Auto-draw, which students can just quickly generate scribbles, and those scribbles can be diagrams that they can also include in their assignments. Art Reader, where students can get 2 images, and those images can create a new artwork. Pictory, where they can create videos, and InVideo. So there's so many different ways that students can create responses to assignments where they leverage the power of artificial intelligence, not just the language models, but all the other spaces within generative AI. And AI as a teacher's assistant. I'm sure with the hype of ChatGPT, there's so many schools that have had a mini PD, and they've spoken about how we can now do report comments and lesson planning, and we can create some content. But there's so much more that we can do with generative AI for assisting teachers. This is a common reaction with a lot of maths teachers, especially as students start using Photomat and other apps like that, because students will just quickly take a picture of the problem and write it in their homework. But as soon as the teachers say, okay, explain your work, that's when people stop using the apps altogether, or they then go back to actually learning. We did an experiment with one of our grade 10 classes a couple of weeks ago, and we actually instructed the class to actually start from the AI. So we gave them content that they'd never seen before, and we said they should use AI to try and solve it. And it was only a few who could actually realize the benefits of personalized learning that they could get from using such tools. But as a teacher, there's so many things that AI can help with. How do you make sure that the students retain the knowledge? Because you ask them about concepts you've spent time working on, and they don't know. You look at the things that you need to do. You need to plan the lessons. You need to teach the lessons. You need to keep everyone engaged. You need to mark. You need to send parent communication. You just look like SpongeBob trying to do everything at the same time. You plan, and life happens. And how do you then manage life happening after your well-laid plans are just not coming to play? You are still thinking about work, even when you're at home, because of all the things that you still need to do. And you plan really fun lessons, and the students are just not as engaged as you would want them to be. So how do you use generative AI to assist with all of these? Because guys, kuningi, and as a teacher in your class, you feel like ngiwan, and how do I then do all of these things with the time that I have, right? But generative AI can help in so many instances. You can prompt it to help you develop lesson plans. Like you're teaching robotics and you need to have a lesson that covers motors and servos and gears for a grade 4 lesson. It can start off with a general structure where you can then look at the lesson plan and see, what do I add, what do I subtract? So you don't sit with that writer's block for a long time, because a lot of the time we spend time thinking about the work even more than doing the work. It gets easy when you've got a template and you start working, but when you're still thinking about how do I lay it out, what do I include, it's easier to edit than to start from scratch. How do I create a rubric? A lot of the things that you're going to do need to be assessed. So how do I create a rubric on this specific concept that I'm teaching? How do I create strategies that will engage and challenge students of different abilities? So how do I differentiate It's easy to come up with a lesson plan that is streamlined, but we all know that in one class there's going to be that kid who's going to be asking, "Ma'am, what's next?" And then there's also going to be that child who's still struggling even with the most basic of the concepts. So how do you make sure that your lesson is effective to all of them? The language models can really assist with those. Creating quizzes, multiple choice quizzes, so that you don't have to spend so much time coming up with the questions, then putting them on a platform like Moodle. You can easily just ask ChatGPT to assist you with that, so that all you're doing is copying and pasting over and editing and standardizing it for what you want it to specifically do. Creating a list of interactive classroom activities. So there's so much value in hands-on learning. How do you make your lesson not just a very long lecture where you are just talking to yourself, but how do you make it tangible learning for the students? What difficulties do children have? So this prompt would have been a very useful prompt when you're starting off as a teacher, because there's things that you know, but you don't know how students are actually experiencing it. So being able to leverage that so that when you're teaching in class, you actually emphasize how to do that. And then personalized generative AI in content creation. It can help you create content that's personalized to your students, that's got multiple paths, automated assessment creations, like those quizzes that you can put in a platform like Moodle, or forms where you can just get checking for understanding with the students, dynamic lesson planning. So lesson planning that doesn't just cover the normal route, but how planning out different scenarios and how to manage those scenarios. Feedback generation, feedback for the students, feedback for the parents, and resource recommendation. With a lot of forms and Moodle, it's always easy to mark multiple choice questions or short answer questions, but then the time that teachers are spending is the longer form questions or the essays. And there's tools out there that can also assist, like IntelliMetric, that will look at the features, the content, the structures, and the mechanics, calculate the score from those things. There's ETS that also marks essays. And there's also ways where you can get your ChatGPT, when you give it access to your rubric, it can also mark the essays for you. But how do we use the power of generative AI in an inquiry-based PBL classroom, like the classrooms that you would find at Future Nation schools? Idea generation and research assistance. With every project that we start, there is a huge chunk of time that we spend where students are coming up with their ideas, so that student voice and choice is really made clear. But how do you then research quickly so that a project can be done on time? How do you effectively manage? Because we know that projects, we're not having one student in a project. How do we then break down the tasks so that not everybody is just doing the same thing? How do we effectively project manage it? You can get that from generative AI. Personalized learning. The whole point of the projects are for the students to learn through the project, but there's different things and different levels to access the students. How do you make sure that you're doing that? Real-time assessment and feedback. We've learned very well that you can't assess a project at the end. So many things happen at the end, and a presentation at the end is not really the best way to assess a project. Real-time assessments and feedback and changing. There's so much about the agile way of working that students learn as we go through the PBL method, and ChatGPT can really help in those instances. Data analysis, as they are coming up with everything, how do they then synthesize it and create content from it? Create real-life content that will be consumed not just by the teacher who's marking, but by an authentic public audience. ChatGPT is really great when you are working in a flipped classroom environment where you are personalizing the pre-learning so that all the students can meet their learning objective, creating simulated or gamified learning experiences where they can answer quizzes, automating the assessments and feedback, and in the classroom actually just handling the hands-on activities so that they can do more homework after that, and you can consolidate it with personalized post-class activities. Other teacher admin tasks that can be done with the help of ChatGPT, student comments, attendance. You still need to get some facial recognition where you don't actually have to mark the register, where the kids can just go through a camera and they'd be able to see that. There's still a lot of issues around that and the ethics of that. But parent and student communication, I don't know how much time I've spent trying to think about how do I word a email that's going to a parent so that I still maintain my reputation with the parent. Tracking students' progress, automating routine paperwork, organizing resources, planning meetings and projects. AI can also be used for general purpose admin. It helps with analysis and automation. You can save so much time, it's more accurate, it's more efficient, and these are some of the tools that you can use for that. You can also use it to support students, so streamlining the admission process and decision making so that it's fair and efficient. Getting the AI to analyze the forms and transcripts and other documents so that it can make better decisions from that, and helping in screening and shortlisting the people there. It saves humans a lot of time from just having to manually go through all those documents. And generative AI for data analysis. Schools go through so much data. But with the help of AI, you can analyze that existing data really quickly and be able to generate detailed insights and be able to make predictions from that. But one other really cool way that AI can help, you can also simulate data. You can also simulate data and use it for predictions. There are challenges though. Things around privacy and security, AI bias, over-reliance on AI. If you start using ChatGPT for the first month, you are so hooked on it, you forget about Google, and you even are asking things that you can actually think about. How do you make sure that the students don't do that? Cost and accessibility, and some ethical concerns around it. The future of AI can be integrated to virtual reality, and people can go on VR excursions, can make data decisions, and also emotional intelligence. So much is already being built. When you're asking ChatGPT to say it in a nice way, or add humor, or add color to text, those are just some of the features that will be done more. AI is not going to take your jobs, but someone who knows how to use AI might. And that's why we need to equip our students to have the skills so that people don't take away their jobs. How we are using it now, our students are being exposed to natural language programming, computer vision, and AI awareness through our computing curriculum at our schools. And in our FET, we are exposing them to certified introduction to emerging technology certificates, and some of them were actually working on Watson for quite some time, even before the popularity of ChatGPT. So in conclusion, there's so much that AI can help with in the school space. The future looks very bright and promising. We should help our students to be content creators, not just consumers of tech, and teach them around the responsible implementation. But we can't close it off. If we close it off, we'll create this mania, and where people are not just supervised, but people are just running wild.
No, thank you so much, Claudie. That was absolutely amazing, and thanks again to Dr. Tshifhiwa. Really amazing. Hopefully, you've heard and you've learned, a lot of things just coming out of this. Just as we summarize before we go to the questions, I mean, it's quite clear that we have to embrace artificial intelligence. We have to embrace technology, obviously with a health warning. And for us as educators, AI is really going to help us if we embrace this about what is learned, what do our students or learners learn, and how do they learn. And this applies to us as educators as well. So we have to embrace it. But when you look at AI and you understand the algorithms that go into it, this is why at Future Nation Schools, we integrate knowledge, we integrate learning, and project-based learning is our approach to learning and teaching, because knowledge is integrated and skills and competences are really integrated. So by adopting a project-based learning approach, we're able to develop not just the knowledge part, but also the skills and competences which young people need to navigate this world. So this again has just demonstrated, especially since the explosion and the hype around ChatGPT, that the approach to learning and teaching in a traditional way, in a standard way, is actually going to create more gaps. It is going to create more gaps. Whereas if we adopt a project-based learning approach or an inquiry-based approach to learning and teaching, and teachers themselves play a very important role of facilitating the learning process, embrace technology, work with one another, it is going to be possible for us to close the gap. So as artificial intelligence democratizes access to information, it is also going to widen the gaps for those who are not able or prepared to embrace it. So that's why it's quite important. So we will now go to the questions that we have on the chat. Some of them actually have been answered, as especially the presentation by both Dr. Tshifhiwa and Xoli was speaking. They were able to answer some of the questions that we have on the chat. So we have about 25 minutes left, so we'll do our best to go through the questions that we have here. So yes, the first question is, how is Future Nation Schools making inroads into the Pretoria and the surrounding areas? Not yet, but yes, of course we are growing, and at the moment we're focusing obviously on the campuses that we have. But yes, in time we'll certainly look at how we can expand. And one of the things that technology is making it possible is to change the way of learning and teaching. So that is something that's certainly on our radar screen. And again, if there are people who could not join, and we must apologize for this, this whole webinar will be available on video, so you can replay it, and you can send us questions. Again, just using our social media platforms or otherwise our website. We'll be able to address your questions. When it comes to the next question, it is about looking at the issue of, there are issues and maybe distinctions here between large language models and artificial intelligence. large language models such as generative AI, they're based on large language models. And so this is a small subset of the larger artificial intelligence area. But let me turn over to Dr. Tshifhiwa here. You may want to just explain a little bit more, maybe even you, Xoli, because sometimes terminology and so on can be a bit daunting and confusing.
Yeah. No, certainly. Thank you, Sizwe. So I think I'll answer these together with another question. I think I saw another question also asking, is AI just another like another 4IR thing, or maybe is it an extension? So I'll start off from 4IR and then try to go down to the LLM themselves, right? So 4IR encompasses everything, all of these technologies that came in this, particularly in our generation. So the generation of our seniors were in the third industrial revolution. So they were not in the 4IR. So fortunately enough, they are championing for us to move into the 4IR space. So that's where we are now. So AI is one of the bigger drivers within the 4IR, one of them being blockchain, for example, there. So when you're looking at AI on its whole is also very big. It's a big umbrella that encompasses many things, many applications. As you might have seen from the presentation that Xoli showed, she showed where AI is being applied in many different components. So one of the ways that I like using describing AI is that AI is an embedded product within a product that you have already. What that means is that AI is there to assist to bring in more intelligence to the processes that you were doing. So that means that you could have been doing this process before without using AI, but now when you put AI, it makes it more efficient. So when you say that it's a large language model, it's basically a technical term for us that I suppose we did not put much effort into naming, because what we basically mean by that is that we are using a very large model that has learnt language. So that is what it is at the end of the day in simple terms.
And the ML, so what's the difference between AI and ML?
Yes, so ML is then a group of algorithms that we then use to teach the models to have AI. So ML is the one that I was focusing on the most in my presentation, talking about machine learning. So ML is the one that takes in the data and learns the data. And then when you start putting in more rules around ML after it is processed, that is when now we're going more into the AI space.
Yeah, that's good. And what are the implications of AI on application development or software development? Xoli, do you want to take that?
So with the use of AI, you can create applications that are smarter. So applications that learn your habits and can recommend things. Like when Sarah was speaking about your Netflix and your Spotify's. It learns the behavior of the user and can give answers really quicker. So it's just employing those APIs and adding them as a layer to your software to make it more user friendly.
Yeah, and then a question from David Rogers here about if you look at the search engines, you could have students go in there, extract data from search engines, but with AI now you can actually get AI to compare, to contrast, to analyze, and so on. In other words, appears like the students are involved in high order thinking, skills. And how do you tell what students can do and what a machine can do? Xoli, do you want to?
So I think the answer to that is generative AI is actually going to change how we teach quite a bit, because it helps students just synthesize the data quicker. That might include other people's work, so plagiarism might also look different. But you can still test the skills of the student. You just need to be a bit more smarter about what are you looking for, and how do you actually get it out of the students? If all you want them to actually do is just only synthesizing, is that the skill that they're actually taking into the new workforce? The spaces that we're saying, companies that we're saying, they might not even need degrees as an entry requirement, because a lot of the learning that happens in higher learning institutions is the synthesis of the knowledge. So is that the goal that we're going for? Do we need to sit down and actually relook at what we are wanting our students to learn as the skills that will take them into this new era of technology?
Yeah. And there's a question from Tabang Gwenya. Hi, Tabang. Just on, especially on when it comes to the mathematics and teachers understanding where mathematics fits in when it comes to artificial intelligence, because especially the back end requires learners to understand how the maths contribute to the development of especially concepts in mathematics. You know, my view is that I think it is important. I mean, it goes back to the point that Xoli was making, in that if teachers who are teaching maths understand how AI works, and they understand, obviously they should understand the processes around mathematics. In other words, whether it's algebra or geometry, trigonometry, and so on. But you can use AI, and students are already using AI, and therefore understanding how students learn and how to use AI in a responsible and constructive way, whether it's in formulas or in algebraic equations, whatever it is, it does mean changing the approaches to learning and teaching on all subjects, including mathematics. So that's really going to be important, because, you know, as Xoli was saying, there are so many applications. You have photo maths, easy maths, and there are a few others that are out there. Students simply take a photo, and it gives them the process and the steps. They generate an answer. As a teacher, it is now going to be a job, one, to encourage students to use that as a tutor, as Xoli was saying, to explain some of the concepts in a way that is easy for them to understand. That does mean, especially for us, I mean, South Africa has 80% of the teachers and students who are not English first language speakers. And therefore, us as Africans getting involved in inputting data, in writing algorithms, in using these platforms in the way that benefits us is going to be particularly important. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. So that's why it's one of the reasons why we organize this webinar, so that, you know, obviously we hope to encourage our own teachers. I mean, we've, you know, doing some PD since the beginning of the year on this, but we're going to have to do more. But I'm just encouraging everyone, teachers, let's not fear technology. Let's not fear AI. Let's rather use it so that we can start to figure out and reflect how we teach, what kind of learning takes place in the classroom, what kind of assessments, formative and summative assessments do we do to make sure that there's much deeper, you know, learning. And then there's a question that talks about, you know, company that is involved in developing applications and education technology company. And the question is, where is government when it comes to policy? I think, you know, we all over the world, governments are grappling with this. In our own country, often when you have technology that runs ahead of policy, regulations, and legislation, you have pain. And the pain comes where obviously other people are going to benefit. You're going to have the ugly and the bad of technologies such as AI. And sometimes policy, legislation, and regulations, you know, it just takes time to catch up, which means here, when you look at what's happening in the AI space, AI is largely being developed in the Northern Hemisphere, in America, in Europe, and in China. You know, that's where the big play and investments and development on human capital is taking place. Africa really does not feature when I talk about the real big stakes. It is our job and responsibilities in government, in education, institutions, and so on, to make sure that we participate, because otherwise, this bias that Dr. Tshifhiwa and Xoli were talking about is going to continue, because all these AI systems are going to be trained on data that does not come from South Africa, does not come from Africa. And it will bias us as Africans in the process, especially if we are just consumers of it and we're not users and developers of content and so on. So that's really, really important. So just looking at further some of the questions. I think we've covered, because some of them, as I indicated earlier, have been answered already in the follow-up presentation, which Xoli made. But just as we go towards, we have about 10 minutes left in the session. So I'd like to just, pose a couple of, questions. And maybe just let's start with the world of work for you, Dr. Tshifhiwa. Because you work obviously in the private sector, and you see some trends. You see young people coming out of university or colleges and so on. What do you think we should be doing as institutions of learning? Which are the areas where we should be focusing on? How should we be moving the process of developing young people in areas that are going to make sure that they meaningfully participate?
All right, thank you, Sizwe. Yes, so in my experience, what I then think that is one of the most crucial parts, and is some of the concerned parties were asking, is really about the fundamental components in mathematics. So I do think that part is there, and what people ought to then go realize is that when you embrace this technology as it is and how it's being presented, you are still going to present and teach people through the fundamentals. What we then need when people come into the industry is that people will need to have been equipped and know and understand what exactly is this technology going to be doing, and how are they going to contribute themselves into building this technology. Because if you don't know how you're going to contribute towards building this this technology, we are then going to be as consumers, as Sizwe was mentioning. And I think it's time for us to not be consumers. In order for us to not be consumers and actually go on and tap into some of these roles, such as data scientists, machine learning engineers, and the likes, and data engineering, we need to actually have embraced the fact that we can actually understand the fundamentals, so that we can go on and scope the different kind of works that need to be done. And also, more importantly as well, is that those who are in the industry already as well learn how these technologies work, so that especially if you're in the space of government places, you can help to open up the policies to allow for the data that is needed. As Sizwe was mentioning, we need the data which is locally curated, and we can only get that data if those who are in the government sectors are also playing a role into pushing policies that can enable that.
Yeah, but one of the things that you mentioned, you're talking about, in fact, it came out of the question, one of the questions, especially by Thabang Ngwenya. I think it is important for us to recognize some of the changes that we need to make in our own curriculum. If you just take, for instance, the statistics that we have in the country, especially when it comes to mathematics. So you look at, how many learners last year wrote grade 12 maths literacy versus those that wrote mathematics. And you'll see that out of the more than 800,000 learners that wrote matric last year, there's almost 2/3 of our learners in the South African system would have written maths literacy. And the problem with that, it just goes back to the point that Dr. Tshifhiwa Maumela was making, that it is really difficult, almost impossible, to train young people as data scientists, as programmers, as coders, as people who are going to meaningfully participate within the economy, especially given where artificial intelligence is going with maths literacy. It's just going to be very, very difficult. So we need to encourage our government, we need to encourage institutions of learning, especially those institutions that are producing teachers, to focus on producing teachers with mathematics. And this really goes all the way down to preschool, foundation, intermediate phase, because by the time we get to senior phase and FET phase, it's too late. So by having a larger growth and increase in our learners who are either taking maths literacy or being encouraged to take maths literacy, essentially we're saying, yes, we understand the importance of humanities, of the arts, but when you look at artificial intelligence and some of these, AI platforms, especially the generative AI, there are three components. In fact, there are more, but at least there are 3 or 4 components. On the one side, it is text and producing text or interpreting text and including sentiments. The second part is images. So if you look at ChatGPT or DALL-E, you are able to produce images. So even for people who are in the arts, and the third one is in the video, the video world. And obviously there are other applications out there. So if you look at text, images, and video, just those 3, and you have people in the arts who are not, who are only just consumers of artificial intelligence, those people are going to be affected quite severely by the emergence of artificial intelligence. So it is really important for even our arts and humanities, especially those areas, to understand the impact of artificial intelligence, to become users and participants, active participants of artificial intelligence. Because otherwise, if today, you can generate videos and you can generate images, you can generate voice, you can generate music using artificial intelligence, it essentially means that a lot of those people who were eking out a living in those areas, because maybe they didn't have mathematics, are now going to be impacted. So there are just major policy implications in terms of how we look at curriculum, how we look at encouraging our learners to do those things that are going to close the gap between the supply and demand of the skills. Otherwise, the issue of unemployment is just going to get worse, is really just going to get worse. So just talking about that, do you want to just add on that?
Yeah, but to also add on to that, so exposing students to technology earlier gives maths meaning. A lot of people struggle with maths because the question they ask themselves is, where am I going to use this, right? So exposing them to the technology quicker. Take, for instance, robotics, understanding how the systems work and understanding positive and negative numbers and how to get where you're going. That's an actual application of maths. That makes students actually love maths because they're seeing the actual application of the maths. With the language models and machine learning, there's so much maths, like complex maths, to actually work through that. If they see that the maths that they're learning actually ties into something, gives them a pathway, then people would actually have a different attitude towards maths. But the general narrative for a lot of students is this X plus Y, where am I ever going to see it in my life and where am I ever going to use it? And it's not just the students, it's also some parents and some teachers who hold that belief. So changing how people see technology and how being a creator of technology needs a very strong maths base will then change how people approach mathematics. So there is work that needs to be done with introducing technology quicker so that they see just the application of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe just also to add on what Xoli was just saying now. So maybe one thing that can be even a shocking even to some of the machine learning and AI practitioners here is that if there's one thing that we have not been taking, most people have not taken cognizant and note of, is that most of the forefathers, as they call them, or the godfathers of AI, so basically the people who were there at the base when AI was being started, majority of them are psychologists. They are not mathematicians, they are not computer scientists, they are not engineers. They are psychologists who then had much interest in mathematics and programming. So going back to Sizwe's point, it is probably of an imperative importance at the moment that we let even those who are in the humanities to also take mathematics areas, because look at what they had actually come and helped to produce so far right now. We are talking about things that that currently people in psychology right now, you probably think this does not relate to you, but the people who started these fields were actually coming from your disciplines.
Yeah. So as we conclude, there are just a couple of issues here which I think we need to just emphasize again. The first one is for parents, teachers, schools, learners. Let us rather embrace artificial intelligence. Let's not fear it. So if you're at home, please, as a parent, play around with it. Obviously, we're making an assumption here. Most of us has smartphones, and you can actually play around with it on your smartphone. So instead of just, using your phone for social media and, lifestyle things, just take the time to familiarize yourself, use it. At the moment, it is largely free. It is, the people like OpenAI are now starting to charge for a lot of the add-on and value-added services that are available on AI. But use it and understand don't fear it. So, I think that's an important thing. The second thing is, as teachers and educators, we have to embrace it and change the way that we teach, because otherwise our students and our learners are going to use artificial intelligence for wrong things, to copy, to actually plagiarize and so on, which will rob them of deep learning in terms of what they are doing. So by us as educators understanding what AI is and how to use it constructively in the classroom, we also need to change our teaching practice, change how we assess, change our approaches to focusing on higher order thinking skills and developing those skills and competencies that young people need. So that's really good. So we can't continue doing what we've been doing and hope that suddenly our learners and students are going to pick up these skills and competencies. It is going to be important, and that can only happen. We can't impart things that we don't have as teachers, that we don't know as teachers. So that's why it's important for us as educators and teachers to embrace it, to reflect. How do we make sure that the way that we teach, the way that we assess is such that we can test for understanding, we can test for understanding of the process of learning, what students are learning and how they are learning. Because otherwise, if we just continue following the traditional approach, at the end of the day, our learners are going to be left behind. So hopefully you have found this session really interesting. We will send out a feedback form because as Future Nation Schools, it is important that out of these future talks, we're able to improve, we're able to discuss topics that are relevant, that are topical, but also that make us reflect, especially around the craft of learning and teaching, so that we can improve the lives of our young people, so that we can make a contribution, a positive contribution in dealing with the unemployment and the inequality that we continue to see affecting particularly our youth in the country. So with those words, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for taking the time this evening to join us. And again, this whole session has been recorded, and we're going to post it on our websites, on our social media, and so on. And again, apologize for those people who are not able to join us, but please send out the message as well to your friends and family who are maybe not able to join because of the technical glitches that we had, to say this webinar is going to be available for them to have a look at, to reflect. And then if they have any questions, they must feel free to send us those questions. We'll also send a survey form, just as I said earlier, so that we can reflect in terms of how we continue to improve. So thank you very much and have a good evening. And this really takes us to the end. And again, I'd like to thank Dr. Tshifhiwa here and Tony. You've been really absolutely amazing. And thanks for the contribution that you've made to this Future Talk. Thank you.
Welcome to Future Nation Schools. Our mission is to produce young people who are confident about themselves and are passionate about what they do. We believe our students have what it takes to become our country's next leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs who value the fact that we are African and are ready for the 21st century. Future Nation Schools aims to lead the African education revolution through our relevant, futuristic, Africa-focused and technology-enabled approach to education. Our network of schools consists of 2 campuses, one in Lyndhurst, which is less than 7 minutes away from Sandton, and the other in Vleerhof, near Roodepoort. Starting from 18 months old, Future Nation Schools offers quality, affordable, African-centered education for preschool, primary, and high school. Our program consists of an enhanced National CAPS curriculum, which includes coding, robotics, and the use of technology in the classroom, and an IEB examination in grade 12. The secret to our success is our unique teaching methodology known as project-based learning that we use from preschool right through to grade 12. Students gain knowledge and skills by working on a long-term, real-world driving question to investigate and respond to their newfound knowledge authentically, engagingly, and enjoyably. Each project is framed by a meaningful problem that challenges students to find solutions. Students must engage in a rigorous, extended process of asking questions, finding information, and applying the information to inform their chosen solution. All projects are developed within a real-world context with real consequences and potential, sometimes even creating opportunities for entrepreneurial skills to be developed. Through project-based learning, students learn to think critically, solve problems, collaborate, and communicate to answer their driving question. And because this model requires students to do much more than simply remember information, studies have found that students using project-based learning understand content more deeply and retain what they learn longer. Because of this approach, we keep our classroom small. Every student is recognized as a unique individual with the ability, ambition, and desire to learn and grow beyond what she or he thought was possible. In addition to project-based learning, Africa stands at the heart of everything we do. Not only is it key for us to show our students that knowledge does not only come from the West, but we believe it's vital that young people recognize that they have a place, a really important place in the world, where they can solve problems that have global implications. But it's not only what goes on in the classroom that matters. Each of our campuses also offers a number of sporting and cultural activities that develop young people in terms of their communication, leadership, debating, and critical thinking skills that cultivates a culture of diversity, fun, respect, integrity, and passion.
The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little extra here at Future Nation Schools.
Just like the school's tagline, someday all schools will teach this way.
We can't wait to help shape your child's future.